Still, they're just as strong as any big guild, Rich Jinchul said with a smirk, and they think they own the place. Pretty funny if you ask me. Jin-Woo nodded in agreement. Yeah, I see what you mean. So did the Ajin Guild tell you what they're up to? Jin-Woo asked. They want permission to control all the gates around Seoul for 1 week. Jinchul replied. Whole week, Jin-Woo muttered. Thinking it over, he had saved the lives of those guild leaders on Jinj Island, so it shouldn't be too hard for them to give in for just 7 days. The weird part was, well, from Jin-Woo's perspective, this plan seemed easy, but for most people, the schedule he'd come up with was super tight, almost impossible to pull off. But why would he do this? If he was after money, there were way better ways to get it. So what was he really after? He could have earned a ton of money if he worked for the US or China. In Korea, Jin-Woo could have joined a top-notch group. So why's Hunter Sung doing all these raids? President Go looked straight at him, with a curious glint in his eye. Why do you think Hunter Sung is doing all these raids? Jinchul thought for a moment before answering. I have one theory, President Go said, sounding surprised that he'd actually gotten an answer. His subordinate now had his full attention. What is it? He asked. Hunter Sung looked really happy, while hunting magic beasts. Jinchul replied. He looked happy. President Go raised an eyebrow in surprise. Yes, sir. Jinchul thought back to the Hunters Guild raid against the High Orcs. Hunter Sung had seemed like he was having a blast at the time. He especially looked thrilled when he killed that boss-level magic beast. President Go's eyes lit up as something Jin-Woo had once said popped into his mind. I want to hunt magic beasts. And that's exactly what Jin-Woo was doing. What an interesting and talented young man, President Go thought to himself. Just then the landline in his office rang. Sir, his secretary's voice came through the intercom. What is it? President Go asked. There's a call for you from the Hunter Command Center in the U.S. The U.S., President Go repeated, intrigued. And from the Hunter Command Center no less. President Go frowned. Why was the Hunter Command Center calling him? The president of the Hunters Association, a superpower like the United States, wouldn't usually ask Korea for help. What could this be about? Patch them through, he said. 2 seconds later, a voice came on the line. This is Adam White, from the Hunter Command Center. This is President Gun-hee Go of the Hunters Association of Korea. Speaking English was one of the basic skills any good businessman needed to know. President Go spoke English like a pro way better than Japanese, which he hadn't used much since he was a kid. Adam jumped right in. What's the Hunter Command Center's business with us? They're planning an event next month. President Go explained, and they want to invite top hunters from around the world. Okay. And, Adam asked, clearly unimpressed. President Go leaned forward slightly. They'd like Hunter Sung to represent Korea. Us meanwhile, Jin-Woo was on the hunt not for monsters, but for a guild to help sell all the loot they'd been collecting from high-ranked dungeons. If they only raided every few days, handling it themselves would be easy. But with their packed schedule, Jin-Woo, the rookie vice president, needed backup. Partnering with another guild would save time and money, compared to dealing with middlemen. Now the question was, which guild? Jin-Woo thought about the White Tiger Guild, since they'd worked together before, or maybe Hayen's Hunters Guild, but in the end, he went with the Knights Guild. One evening, something exciting happened when Jin-Woo decided to make a call. Jong-soo, the president of the Knights Guild, was relaxing on his couch, laughing at a funny TV show. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. Without thinking much, he reached for it and saw Jin-Woo's name pop up. Surprised, Jong-soo quickly sat up and answered the call. Hello. A voice answered on the first ring. This is Jin-Woo Sung from the Ajin Guild, said the caller. Jong-soo Park, from the Knights Guild, sounded intrigued as he replied. Oh, hi, do you have time to talk right now? Jin-Woo asked. Of course, Jong-soo said cheerfully. As Jin-Woo shared his idea, a big grin spread across Jong-soo's face. He had been bummed out because some new rules ruined his plan to team up with Jin-Woo. But now, things were looking up again. Jong-soo's plan to team up the Knights Guild with Hunter Sung had fallen apart, and Vice President Yoon-tae wasn't happy about it. But then, out of nowhere came an unexpected offer. A welcome surprise. Jong-soo's voice stayed cheerful as he replied. Absolutely, we're on it. Managing dungeon loot was no big deal for the experienced Knights Guild. They were ready to take charge and make things right. After all, This was why they had a separate processing team. Jongsu grinned from ear to ear. See you tomorrow. The lunch his mom packed was super tasty, even though he was munching on it in a dungeon crawling with magic beasts. Jin-Woo glanced around while chewing. Eating like this feels just like when we used to hang out in those lower-level dungeons. Boss. Jin-Woo chuckled, shaking his head with a smile. You might want to swallow before talking, someone said with a grin. Sorry boss. Jin-Woo chuckled, understanding exactly why Jin-Woo was annoyed. Back in the day they used to grab every gate they could find, and bounce from one dungeon to another. Non-stop. The only difference now, those gates were way tougher rank or higher instead of C rank. Jin-Woo couldn't help but nitpick a little. Igris caught him staring and gave a polite bow. We'll keep watch while we eat, he said. Not that Jin-Woo needed someone to have his back, but the gesture was nice. Jin-Woo had super sharp senses that let him detect even the slightest movements in the dungeon, even when he wasn't paying attention. He could handle any monster that came his way without even looking. But honestly Jin-Woo hated when his meals were interrupted. Plus he wanted Jin-Woo to feel safe and relaxed. So during mealtime he made sure to have guards posted. Jin-Woo glanced away for a moment. Iron caught his eye and gave him a confident nod. Then, with a loud thud, Iron thumped his chest like he was saying, "Don't worry. I've got this." The loud clang of metal echoed through the cave. Jin-Woo shook his head. That dude's problem is he's way too intense, he said. Jin-Woo looked toward the commotion, and suddenly asked, Boss. Yeah? Jin-Woo replied. Can your minions move around on their own? Jin-Woo asked. Yeah, something like that. Hunter Men had once mentioned something about shadow soldiers having their own personalities, but Jin-Woo wasn't sure how much of that he should believe. Jin-Woo kept going, curious about the whole thing. So why not let your minions keep raiding while we eat, or when you're busy, boss? Jin-Woo asked. Nope, I can't do that. Jin-Woo replied, shaking his head. He knew that the farther away he was from his soldiers, the less strong they got, but explaining stuff like that to Jin-Woo would just confuse him. So Jin-Woo put on a serious face and said, who knows what kind of trouble they'll get into if I'm not around. Jin-Woo's eyes widened in surprise, and his stomach seemed to sink at the thought. He suddenly wasn't hungry anymore. Time to get serious. Jin-Woo finished his lunch and set his spoon aside. He was curious about a new skill he'd gotten, Shadow Storage LV2. This was a special ability just for his job. And the best part, it didn't cost any mana. Here's how it worked. Jin-Woo could absorb shadow soldiers into his own shadow. Once they were stored he could call them back, or see them in whenever he wanted. Right now he had 840 shadow soldiers stored out of a maximum of 840. Talk about being fully loaded. And there was more. With LV2, Jin-Woo got a cool bonus called sensory sharing. This meant that any shadow soldier he stored could share what they saw, heard or felt with him. It was like having his own personal spy network built right into the skill. This ability sounded pretty awesome. Jin-Woo couldn't wait to see how it worked in action. Jin-Woo had a special skill that let him see and feel everything his shadow soldiers experienced. It was super useful for checking out what was happening from far away. Jin-Woo closed his eyes and focused on sensory sharing. Suddenly he could sense his shadow soldiers spread all across Korea. He picked one randomly to connect with. It turned out to be the shadow soldier he had stationed near Hein. Tishund. Trunj Jin-Woo heard the sound of water hitting the floor. But it wasn't raining, so where was that water coming from? His confusion didn't last long. His eyes snapped open when he saw Hein's naked body surrounded by steam. Jin-Woo jumped back at Jin-Ho's reaction. Boss? Did you nod off for a bit? Jin-Woo shook his head quickly. No, nothing's wrong. He thought about taking Hein out for dinner as an apology, but then changed his mind. Hey, boss. Did you hear the news? Someone asked. Hear what? You know that S-rank gate in Shinjuku. People are saying it might break open tomorrow. Jin-Woo nodded. It felt like just yesterday they'd started raiding these high-ranked dungeons. But 6 days had already flown by. He hadn't been sitting around doing nothing during that time. Little by little, Jin-Woo had been earning experience points, and his hard work paid off. He'd jumped from level 101 all the way to 10-3. That was his reward for putting everything else on hold and focusing only on leveling up. Jin-Woo pulled the black key out of his inventory. It appeared right in the palm of his hand. Item carton on Temple's Key X acquisition difficulty. Revealed after the allotted time passes. His remaining time, 26:51:49. Just 1 day left before he could use it. Jin-Woo clenched the key tightly, feeling its strange power in his grasp. Jin-Woo's heart raced every time he saw it. He couldn't help but sneak glances at Igris and Iron. Thanks to Jin-Woo's prank earlier. But then Jin-Woo shouted, "Stop." Jin-Woo jumped in surprise. Huh. Jin-Woo quickly added, "Not you." The shadow soldiers froze at Jin-Woo's command. Suddenly low growls echoed through the cave groan, followed by an even louder growler. From the darkness emerged snarling beasts, their sharp fangs glinting under flickering torchlight. Some gripped weapons like sickles and swords in their clawed hands, ready to attack. Jin-Woo pushed to his feet, locking eyes with them in a fierce stare. "One more day. That's all I need." He flashed a confident smirk as he tightened his grip on the demon monarch's dagger. The night before the dungeon was set to break, Yuri had set up an enormous divination circle around Shinjuku, something no one had ever seen before. It glowed faintly in the dark surrounding the entire area. While everyone else had been evacuated to safety, Yuri remained behind, double-checking the barrier one last time. The Japanese team watched the hunter with wide eyes hanging onto his every word and move. Yuri scratched his chin, looking puzzled. "This is really strange," he muttered. The interpreter's eyes popped open in surprise. "Wait, did something go wrong?" "No, it's not that," Yuri replied quickly. The barrier had been set up perfectly. This was the best he could do. But still, he couldn't shake off the feeling. "I sense someone nearby." "What?" The interpreter stared at him in shock. Why else would Yuri's heart be pounding like a drum? Yuri shouted at the top of his lungs, "Who are you? Where are you hiding?" But his voice echoed through the empty streets with no reply. The staff member wiped sweat from his forehead and forced a shaky smile. "There shouldn't be anyone left, right? The dungeon break is tomorrow." Yuri glared at him, clearly not buying it. "Wait, I never said it was a person." "Huh." Yuri shot him a sympathetic glance before looking away. "Maybe I just imagined it." Meanwhile, a mysterious figure in a hoodie watched Yuri from the rooftop of a skyscraper across the street. This guy was sharp. It all connected since Yuri's powers came from a specific place. The figure's eyes then moved to something even bigger, the S-rank gate, which was super important. The air felt heavy with an eerie silence around him. The man pulled back his hood, revealing a man of Asian descent in his late 30s. His wild, messy beard made it clear who he was. It was Ilwan Sung. He stared at the gate with a look of regret before covering himself up again. Finally, he muttered to himself, "It begins." Everything was going just as he had planned. Meanwhile, reporters from all over the globe were rushing to Japan. Most of these reporters were used to covering wars. They'd been in the thick of battle before, so they knew that reporting on this story felt a lot like stepping onto a battlefield. The area around the gate was super secure. Cameras snapped pictures of the huge circle drawn on the ground, and the army surrounding it. You could feel the tension in the air. It was so thick, it felt like anything could happen at any second. William Bell, a famous reporter from England, was there with his assistant. His assistant gulped hard before asking a question that everyone was wondering. "The most advanced guns don't work on magic beasts. So why is the military even here?" William snapped photos of the soldiers' determined faces, as he replied, "To buy some time." "What do you mean?" "They'll act like bait to distract the beasts. This gives hunters a chance to get ready and strike. Meanwhile, people like us, and the big bosses watching from a distance can escape safely." Kashak. William's next shot captured Shigeo Matsumoto, the president of the Hunters Association of Japan, standing tall on the scene. He stood near the gate, looking serious as he talked to other officials. Not exactly a smiley kind of situation. "Kashak, you mean?" The nervous assistant looked worried. "They're human shields." "Hey, don't knock it." "Huh, you're here as my human shield." The assistant stared in shock. "Excuse me." William nudged him playfully. "Relax. Okay. If you stay this tense, you might pass out," Mr. Bell said with a grin. The young reporter let out a sigh of relief, feeling his shoulders drop as he relaxed. Only Mr. Bell could joke at a time like this. The rookie muttered under his breath. He had learned that when his mentor made light of things, it was usually a sign that the situation was more serious than it seemed. Glancing up at the towering gate ahead, the young man wondered what lay beyond it. "What's gonna come out?" William's finger hovered over the camera's shutter button as he followed his assistant's stare. The gate loomed above them, massive enough to leave everyone in awe. Since these gates started appearing, they've become hotspots for war photographers like William, who has covered many. He even captured a dungeon break once, but this one was on a whole other scale. Just looking at it made William start sweating. No surprise that no one sent in scouts. None of the top hunters dared to even step inside. So whatever magic beasts were inside remained a total mystery. I have no idea what might come out of there, William muttered, letting out a bitter smile. Is Yuri Orlov's force field strong enough? Someone wondered. The camera zoomed in on Yuri, who was checking his barrier with a big grin. Perfect, he said confidently. His creation impressed everyone, but there was a secret. President Matsumoto was paying Yuri without telling anyone, so people thought Yuri was just being nice. Thanks to Yuri's bravery, the people of Japan donated a huge amount of money to support him. He became an overnight superstar with reporters risking their lives to share his story. All this fame and wealth came from just one mission, which he thought was perfect. Yuri made history as the first person to block an S-rank gate alone, though another hunter had already claimed the title of being the first to clear it solo. Yuri was a support-type hunter, while the other guy was more of a brawler. It's like comparing apples and oranges. Yuri didn't mind being different because he was proud of being the best at what he did. Then there was Mr. Orlov, a cocky Russian hunter, who pulled out a shiny flask from his pocket. The smell of alcohol filled the air, and one of the association staff in charge of the star hunters looked worried. Mr. Orlov, you can't drink, the staff member protested nervously. Yuri shot him a sharp look. Relax, I'm just celebrating. It's a toast. He grinned confidently. You're about to see something amazing. The staff member hesitated again, but, still, Yuri tilted his head and offered the flask with a smirk. Want some? Relax. It'll calm your nerves, Yuri said with a grin, tossing an arm around President Matsumoto's shoulders. He nudged a small flask toward him. The president scowled, clearly annoyed by Yuri's casual attitude. Can't believe the fate of Japan rests in the hands of someone like that, Matsumoto thought to himself. He turned to his secretary instead. How many S-rank hunters are ready to go? 3, sir. The secretary replied. Matsumoto sighed. Only 3 out of more than 10 S-rank hunters had answered the association's call. President Matsumoto looked worn out, with deep wrinkles etched on his face. After the disaster on Jeju Island, his reputation among hunters was at its lowest point. Many blamed him, saying his selfish choices led to the deaths of top S-rank hunters. Now most of those high-ranking hunters had turned against him. Some even vowed to ignore the association's orders until he stepped down as president. Matsumoto's hands shook as he thought about how alone he felt. If only Ryuji were here with me, he sighed quietly to himself. President Matsumoto sat in silence, staring at the giant gate hovering above Japan. This was an S-rank dungeon break, and everyone was watching. He thought about his old partner, Ryuji Goto, whose death still felt like a punch to the gut. But today was different. Today was about redemption. Matsumoto's eyes narrowed as he thought about Gun-hee-go and Jin-Woo Sung. Those two had humiliated him before, but not this time. Not if everything went according to plan. He clenched his fists, his mind racing with determination. This had to work. Hades too. 3 minutes until the dungeon breaks, sir. His secretary whispered, breaking the tension. Matsumoto nodded sharply, keeping his gaze fixed on the gate. The clock was ticking 2 minutes, 1 minute, and 59 seconds. 58 seconds. Suddenly the reporters erupted in a frenzy of shouts. It's opening, someone cried. They're coming out. Jin-Woo Sung, watching this all unfold on TV at home, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His mom turned to him from the couch, her eyes sharp with suspicion. You're not planning to sneak out or something, are you? Jin-Woo's heart skipped a beat. How did she know? He shrugged casually, trying to play it cool. Nah, why would I? But the guilt was written all over his face. The TV screen showed chaos as hunters began pouring out of the gate. Jin-Woo's fingers twitched with the urge to join them. But he stayed put. For now at least he'd behave. I have plans with someone. Plans. On a day like this. I made them a while back. Since the gate is all the way in Japan, it's not my problem. As his mom gave him a suspicious look. But Jin-Woo wasn't exactly lying. He'd kind of promised the system he'd show up earlier. Kyung-hee stared at him for a moment before asking, so I don't need to worry. But Jin-Woo nodded firmly. No, you don't. Jin-Woo had steeled himself for that moment. Kyunyu saw the confidence in her son's eyes and cracked a small smile, nodding. All right, stay safe, she said. Jin-Woo mirrored her smile. I'm off. He left with determination in his step, heading out the door. Their apartment was on the 9th floor, and as he waited for the elevator, he realized how slow it was, something he'd never noticed before. Jin-Woo was super excited to see what kind of dungeon the black key would unlock. He couldn't wait. The elevator doors opened on the 1st floor, and a man Jin-Woo had never seen before looked him straight in the eye. The guy clearly had no idea he was standing next to an S-rank hunter. His eyes went wide as he realized who Jin-Woo was. Jin-Woo quickly pulled up his hood and walked past the man, trying to keep a low profile. Jin-Woo's excitement made him walk faster. Once he was outside his apartment building, he looked around carefully to make sure no one was watching. The streets were quiet, so he took his time checking the black key in his hand. Item, Cardonon Temple's key, Skitures acquisition difficulty. Est unknown, category. Key, you've met all the requirements. This key unlocks the main entrance of Cardonon Temple. Jin-Woo wondered if this key was connected to a gate he had seen in Japan. You can use it at the special gate they told you about. The gate's location will pop up after the timer runs out. Time left 1 minute and 2 seconds. Just over a minute to go. It's almost time. His heart started thumping like crazy. Boom, boom. He didn't need to check the clock. After all his intense training, his internal timer was super precise. 3, 2, 1 twine on schedule. Jin-Woo opened his eyes after exactly 1 minute. Bulb, beep. Time's up. A 3-2. The gate's location is revealed now. A 3-2. Jumped in surprise, but wait. The gate the system pointed to wasn't far from where he stood. Jin-Woo pulled out his hunter phone and checked the website. Sure enough, there was a recent record of a gate appearing in this very spot. Who would have thought this familiar place was where he'd finally used the key? It felt like the ground had been yanked right out from under him. He'd totally misunderstood the description earlier, but it turned out, the system hadn't lied to him at all. The system was telling the truth all along. Wait, that's not right. Jin-Woo muttered. The message had promised to reveal where the gate was, but it didn't say anything about a brand new one popping up. He felt totally tricked. His fingers flew across his phone as he checked the details. Some guild had already started attacking it, and the gate was ranked not super high. But here's the kicker. No one had any clue what was inside. On the bright side, it was close by, just a 10-minute drive, or a quick 60-second sprint, if he ran flat out. He snuck around using stealth and zoomed to his destination with flash. The spot was Gina's high school yard. Since the school had been closed temporarily after the orc attack, there were probably no civilians in danger. But the strike squad was in trouble. Jin-Woo remembered the first time he explored that underground temple. It was one terrifying moment after another, with barely escaping death more than once. Yet, even though those memories scared him and left emotional scars, they also got his heart racing.